The Overlook Hotel has a long history of violence and abuse, and as we know, this history repeats itself time and time again. Jack Torrance gets caught up in this cycle when he brings his wife Wendy and their son Danny to stay at the hotel with him over the winter as he takes a job as the caretaker. But he is no stranger to abusive behavior, and going to the Overlook pushed him to the extreme, attempting to kill his own family. I'm going to be talking about the historical cycle of the Overlook Hotel, as well as the parallels between Jack and Grady, followed by my own theory about Jack's troubled past and how it all ties into the film's generational abuse theme, which I think is one of the biggest themes in a movie packed with various meanings and interpretations. There are more historical references that fit into this theme, such as Native American genocide motifs, but I would not be going over those since there are already many sources highlighting them. Instead, I wanted to speak more about how past and present abuse affects the characters within the film. Jack has been an abusive father, even before he stepped foot into the Overlook. Wendy tells Danny's psychiatrist a story from 5 months prior to the start of the film, when Jack had come home late from work after he had been drinking.
Well, Danny had scattered some of his school papers all over the room, and my husband grabbed his arm, to pull him away from him. On this particular occasion, my husband just used too much strength, and he injured Danny's arm.
According to Wendy, Jack got angry and grabbed Danny to pull him out of the room, accidentally dislocating his shoulder in the process. Wendy says that after this incident, Jack had vowed to stop drinking.
Something good did come out of it all, because he said, Wendy, I'm never going to touch another drop. And if I do, you can leave me. And he didn't, and he hasn't had any alcohol in 5 months.
But based on Wendy's dismissive behavior of this incident, makes it likely that there had been previous times when Jack had caused her and Danny distress or even physical injury. But this abuse will reach an all-time high when Jack, Wendy, and Danny go to the Overlook for the winter. The Overlook Hotel causes abusive behavior to cycle through generations. When Jack talks to the former caretaker, Delbert Grady, he says this:
"But you are the caretaker. You've always been the caretaker. I should know, sir. I've always been here."
This, as well as the film's closing shot featuring Jack in a photo from 1921, suggests that Jack, as well as Grady, have been trapped in a cycle of time for many, many years, as the film takes place in the late 1970s. In the photo, Jack appears to be a party guest. It's also possible that he once worked at the hotel. But how can this be? Is Jack's soul trapped in the Overlook for all of eternity, and physical reincarnations of him keep finding their way back to the hotel? When Jack first arrives at the bar, he says this:
"God, I'd give anything for a drink. Give my goddamn soul just a glass of beer."
Lloyd the bartender appears and offers Jack a drink. Is this a representation of Jack selling his soul to the Overlook, keeping his spirit locked in the hotel forever? Jack also says this:
"I like you, Lloyd. I always liked you. You were always the best of them."
It seems that Jack, or his spiritual form, has been in the Overlook long enough to get to know multiple bartenders that worked there. When Jack returns to the bar, there are hundreds of fancy party guests in the Gold Room where it is located. He runs into a man he soon finds out is Delbert Grady, who spills a tray of food on him. He follows him to the bathroom to clean off his jacket. During Jack's interview, the hotel manager, Stuart Ullman, told the story of Grady, who was hired as a caretaker during the winter of 1970. Grady also brought his family, his wife and 2 daughters, to stay with him.
At some point during the winter, he must have suffered some kind of a complete mental breakdown. He ran amok and he killed his family with an axe.
Danny sees Grady's daughters twice in the film. They appear as twins who talk and dress identically. They tell Danny they want to play with him forever and ever, or trap him in the hotel for eternity. Danny sees visions of them murdered and covered in blood, with an axe lying nearby. But there's a problem with these visions in the description that Ullman gave us of Delbert Grady and his daughters. First of all, Ullman said that
My predecessor in this job hired a man named Charles Grady as the winter caretaker. And he came up here with his wife and two little girls, I think about 8 and 10.
the man Jack speaks with in the bathroom is referred to multiple times as Delbert Grady.
What do they call you around here, Jeezy?
Grady, sir. Delbert Grady.
Delbert Grady.
That's right, sir.
And the girls that Danny encounters are clearly twins. So this means that Charles Grady is either a reincarnation of Delbert Grady, or there are multiple generations of Grady men who both murdered their families. Either way, this demonstrates how abuse cycles through the Overlook over the years. Remember Wendy told us about how 5 months ago, Jack had unintentionally injured Danny and vowed to never drink again. He reflects on this with Lloyd the bartender.
Here's to 5 miserable months on the wagon and all the irreparable harm that it's caused me.
Jack goes off about how Wendy will never let him forget the incident, before saying this.
It was an accident. Completely unintentional. Could have happened to anybody. And it was 3 goddamn years ago!
Wait, 3 years ago? Why would he say this when just a couple minutes earlier he claimed it had been 5 months? And Wendy gave us confirmation that the first date was correct, since the incident had inspired him to become sober. Could it be that these were 2 different events in time? As I also mentioned earlier, Jack talks to Lloyd as though he's an old friend. He would have had to have been to the hotel before. He even said it himself.
When I came up here for my interview, it was as though I'd been here before. I mean, we all have moments of deja vu, but this was ridiculous. It was almost as though I knew what was going to be around every corner.
Here's my proposition. This version of Jack that we see midway through the bar scene represents his father. Since we know that the incident with Grady and his family happened twice, between 2 generations, I don't think it's a stretch to say that an incident with Jack and his son could have happened twice. The incident we hear about, where Jack dislocated Danny's shoulder, had also happened a generation earlier. When Jack was a child, his father had injured his arm in an identical drunk episode. It's also worth noting how, when Jack asked Grady about murdering his family, he initially denies doing it, but admits to it moments later, just as Jack originally tells Lloyd he never laid a hand on Danny before going back on the statement, claiming it was just an accident.
You, chopped your wife and daughter up into little bits.
That's strange, sir. I don't have any recollection of that at all. My girls, sir, they didn't care for the Overlook at first. One of them actually stole a pack of matches and tried to burn it down. But I corrected them, sir. And when my wife tried to prevent me from doing my duty, I corrected her.
I never laid a hand on him, goddammit. I didn't. I did hurt him once, okay? It was an accident.
When Wendy discovers Jack's typewriter, she finds hundreds of pages with the phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," typed thousands of times. I know this is an old saying, and I'll get to that in a minute, but why would Jack refer to himself in the third person when writing? To me, this sounds like something Jack's father, who in the film is never mentioned, but is named Mark Torrance in the Shining novel, would say about Jack, perhaps to his wife. We know that Jack resents Danny, so it's plausible that Jack's father resented Jack as a child, evident by his referring to him as a dull boy. In the novel, Mark is an alcoholic as well as an abusive father and husband, who Jack has a love-hate relationship with. I think the same information can be inferred to be true for the film, since it fits the theme so well. So the abuse and neglect Jack suffered as a child has influenced him to treat Danny in the same way he had been, as it is not uncommon for abuse victims to continue this cycle by projecting the behavior they suffered onto others. A detail that I've seen pointed out online helps support this. On Jack's all work pages, there's what appears to be a typo. But I believe this was intentional, a clever way to subtly communicate a larger theme. With the repetition of this single line, it's very easy to overlook, but notice that it says, all work and no play makes Jack adult boy. An adult boy sounds like someone with a child's mind stuck in an adult's body. Jack is an adult, but he never really acts like one. He is tasked with taking care of the hotel and constantly points this out to Wendy.
Ever thought about my responsibilities?
Oh, Jack, what are you talking about?
Have you ever had a single moment's thought about my responsibilities? Have you ever thought for a single solitary moment about my responsibilities to my employers?
Having responsibilities is one of the main differences between adults and children. Taken literally, the phrase all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy is a proverb about the lack of balancing work and relaxation and how a person can become dull because of it. But Jack doesn't have a problem with this because he does no work. It is always Wendy we see actually taking care of the hotel and never Jack. Wendy runs the boiler, manages the radio, takes care of Danny, and even brings Jack breakfast. On the other hand, Jack tries to focus on writing, but ends up wandering around the hotel, playing with toys and encountering spirits, the same things that Danny, a literal child, does. Jack is stuck in a continuous cycle of unproductivity. Wendy is the responsible adult here. Let's say that adult boy is hinting that we should think of Jack and Danny as the same person symbolically, and there is a significant parallel between them. Danny is in the same position that Jack was in at his age, suffering under an abusive father. We know that Jack grew up and continued this cycle. Danny, however, has psychic abilities that allowed him to be able to change his circumstances and escape. But in his case, if he were murdered by Jack, being stuck in the cycle would have meant being literally trapped in the eternal time loop of the Overlook Hotel, just as the Grady daughters are.